Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm starting to wonder how much of a cliffhanger the schedule for an Artemis II launch in February will be. NASA Exploration Ground Systems has about 5 weeks until a relatively short window of opportunity to roll the vehicle out to Pad 39B at the Kennedy Space Center, in front of another relatively short window where they can launch Artemis II to the moon in early February. It sounds like the people will be ready if they aren't ready right now, but NASA has been quiet about launch preparations since before Thanksgiving. There was a long government shutdown in front of that, so we've heard just one update basically since the end of the summer. Artemis launches are rare, so no news just feeds uncertainty, especially given what we've seen or heard, or not seen or heard, over the past few years. Past performance isn't a guarantee, but the past for Artemis has seen a lot of secrecy followed by more delays. Maybe it's different this time. We'll see. The big news of the week was political. Jared Isaacman is one step away from being NASA administrator, again, and I'll run through that. And NASA SLS Public Affairs also continued to backfill tank watching imagery from the Artemis III and Artemis IV hardware milestones and movement during the shutdown. I'm leading with Artemis II watch as usual, but the story once again is that there was no news reported this week. We didn't get a status update from NASA, and the last one of those was before Thanksgiving, over 3 weeks ago. The Artemis II flight crew did report right after that the countdown demonstration test was delayed into this month, and we're now almost halfway through December with nothing since. Spaceflight Now did report last week that issues with Orion's hatch delayed the test last month, and also that Exploration Ground Systems decided to perform servicing of the spacecraft water tanks in the meantime. After that story was published on December 4th, I asked NASA Public Affairs about the status of that servicing and of servicing of the gaseous nitrogen tank, which was also planned post-Orion stacking, and so far no response. Which leads to the question whether no news is good news or bad news right now. The last update was that the CDDT was delayed, which leaves open questions about how well things are going for early February. Anecdotally, we're still seeing the crew and overall flight control team that will fly and oversee the mission continue on a schedule to support the early February window of opportunity, launch period 17. But the question is still about the flight hardware, since that has long been the critical path for launch readiness. To be fair, EGS, Orion, and SLS have been able to stay on a schedule to support the early February opportunity pretty much all of this year so far. But big picture, this is the first crewed Artemis flight and only the second integrated Orion SLS launch and mission. These aren't routine flights in this phase of Artemis. There are going to be more questions about how things are going because of that. Going into the work week of December 15th, there are 16 days left in the month. NASA is bookkeeping an 18-day pad flow ahead of a first launch attempt, with rollout to the pad at the beginning of that period. As I've been noting, NASA can't roll out early because the vehicle is not designed to be fully serviced at the pad, and components like the flight termination system have a limited period where they are valid for use before they have to be re-verified. So, using the February 5th date that we heard back in late September as a hypothetical, that would put an also hypothetical rollout on or about January 18th, which would mean there's just about 5 weeks of time left before that date. Although hypothetical, the February window of opportunity for launch is only a handful of days long, which makes a window of opportunity for rollout around the same. So those are the timeframes we're watching: early February for launch and mid-January for rollout to support that. The last 2 weeks of the month and the year are traditionally holiday weeks, so next week might be one of the last chances to get an update before New Year's. By the time everyone is back after the holidays, there will be less than 2 weeks until that period of time when the vehicle and mobile launcher would need to roll out from the VAB to launch Pad 39B for an early February launch. As an aside, it's worth noting that the mission analysis at the time we heard that February 5th date was still considered preliminary. So February 5th may or may not be the actual first opportunity. It may be the 6th or the 4th or something else in that first week of February. There's a good chance that the exact launch window timing changes, and maybe even the exact launch dates. NASA Public Affairs for the SLS program at Marshall Space Flight Center and at the Michoud Assembly Facility continue to publish imagery to add to the timeline of work during the U.S. government shutdown in October and half of November. Some of the NASA workforce was exempted from furlough during that time, and SLS Stages prime contractor Boeing continued production at MAF in New Orleans. Over the previous week and a half, NASA published imagery covering September, October, and November, which they couldn't review while away from work. This past week, we got some additional imagery of the Core Stage 3 aft join, which consists of the liquid hydrogen tank and what SLS is calling an LH2 transport adapter assembly. As I noted last week, it closely resembles the Core Stage engine section qualification article, which was built in 2016 and 2017 as a part of the structural test article to qualify, verify, and certify the stage structure for first flight. PAO was able to confirm with the SLS program that this is the engine section qualification article, aka the STA or structural test article. It's worth saying again that the engine section structure is both the welded barrel that we see and the bolted thrust structure that we rarely see. What was added to the public record this past week was imagery of the LH2 tank being lifted into Cell A in Building 110 at MAF on September 28th for mating with the LH2 transport assembly, and then that mated aft join being lifted out of Cell A on October 6th after the structures were bolted together. As the name suggests, the adapter will support delivery of the upper 4/5 of the stage from MAF to the Kennedy Space Center without the engine section, which is already installed in Boeing's Core Stage Vertical Integration Center tool in High Bay 2 of the Vehicle Assembly Building in Florida. The newly released imagery provides additional views of the adapter where we can see the exterior elements of the engine section barrel. Comparing and contrasting imagery of the engine section STA back in 2017 and 2019 and now in 2025, late 2025, one set of aft reaction structure beams that support a liquid oxygen feed line was removed, and almost all of the openings cut out of the barrel have been covered. That includes the openings for the feed lines themselves, the two tail service mast umbilicals, vent holes, repressurization lines, the systems tunnel, and the access door. The new pictures taken on October 6th also show other areas around the circumference, such as locations where onboard video cameras are installed on the flight articles. Additional imagery covering a lot of the milestones later in October and November were released the previous week, which I covered in the previous video and another one for members of the channel. For Core Stage 3, the aft join is back in the final assembly area at Michoud for additional outfitting ahead of the last join in New Orleans sometime later. The forward join of the inner tank, liquid oxygen tank, and forward skirt was in progress in Cell D of Building 110. The last we saw from imagery taken about a month ago, the forward skirt was staged in the transfer aisle for lifting into place on top of the LOX tank. Those two subassemblies, the forward join and the aft join, will eventually be mated into a single 4/5 subassembly. The most recent forecast from NASA and Boeing back in the summertime was that the 4/5 subassembly, the top four flight elements, would be ready to mate to the real engine section at Kennedy Space Center next spring. Before that readiness, the two joins need more outfitting before and after they are put together. And then that will be placed on NASA's overland carriers and transporter, rolled onto the Pegasus barge, and shipped to KSC. After arriving at the launch site, it will be rolled into the Vehicle Assembly Building and broken over again to vertical and lifted into High Bay 2, where the engine section transport adapter will be unbolted. That allows the flight elements to be lifted into the Vertical Integration Center for final mating of the full core stage for Artemis III. Overall, given the official dates for Artemis 3 and 4, which haven't changed despite what we've learned throughout the year, Boeing still has a lot of SLS stages production work to complete for those missions in the next 2 years. That would be to finish the Artemis 3 core stage next year, and then the 2 stages for Artemis 4, including the first flight exploration upper stage. The 2 core stage engine sections for those missions are already at the Kennedy Space Center. In fact, they're both in the Vehicle Assembly Building now that Boeing has consolidated their SLS operations there. As noted, the Core Stage 3 engine section is installed in the Vertical Integration Center tool in High Bay 2, where it is still being outfitted with main propulsion system hardware ahead of final assembly next year. The Core Stage 4 engine section was parked in a temporary location in the transfer aisle. It is in an earlier phase of the same outfitting. New tooling is expected to arrive in the new year so that production of both units can be done inside the High Bay 2 footprint. In New Orleans at MAF, Boeing is finishing assembly of the Core Stage 3 4/5 elements. Presumably, the forward join hardware has been bolted together in Cell D by now, which leaves only one more major join at Michoud. Before and after that, though, there is a lot of outfitting work that needs to be completed internally and externally. For Artemis IV bigger picture, EUS has a longer to-do list than the core stage. In the next 2 years, Boeing has to complete both the structural test article and the flight article. The STA needs to complete all that testing at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, and the flight article needs to complete a long green run design verification campaign at the Stennis Space Center in southern Mississippi. To support all the integrated testing at KSC with Mobile Launcher 2 in time for a September 2028 launch date, the green run would likely need to be completed by this time 2 years from now, which puts completion and delivery to Stennis on a shorter schedule than that. Back in late September in Houston at the Artemis II briefings there, one of the things I asked SLS Associate Program Manager Sharon Cobb about was the outlook for Artemis IV. How is it looking for the Artemis IV build? I mean, is it do you think you're going to be able to is the I mean, I know it's officially still September 28. Is that still realistic in terms of having, getting the green run done for EUS and getting the SLS part of it? I mean, I know EGS has got a lot of work to do themselves. Is that still a realistic goal for from the SLS standpoint?
That is what we are planning to. Obviously, everything that happens between now and then is going to impact, what when we actually launch, whether Artemis 3 goes on time, whether everything we need to fly is ready. So they have laid out a schedule that meets that date.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of time between now and then, and a lot of parts have to come in, and a lot of suppliers have to do their part of the job, but the schedule that we have laid out will allow us to get there in 28.
The Senate Commerce Committee held a secret executive session on the evening of Monday, December 8th, voting to advance the nominations of a few people under consideration. That included NASA Administrator nominee Jared Isaacman. By a vote this time of 18-10, his nomination was advanced to the Senate floor. It was placed on the Senate's executive calendar, and then Thursday afternoon, Washington time, cloture was invoked, procedurally ending debate. Here's what that parliamentary procedure looked like this time, very similar to back on May 22nd.
Mr. President, I move to proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 593.
The questions on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Jared Isaacman of Pennsylvania to be Administrator.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report.
Cloture motion, we the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Jared Isaacman of Pennsylvania to be Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent the reading of the names be waived,
Without objection,
and I move to proceed to legislative session.
the questions on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to.
All that's left is for the Senate to decide on confirmation itself, and that's what we'll be looking for next, very likely a recorded vote. The committee vote of 18-10 on Monday had only one difference from the first vote back in late April. The only vote that changed this time was that Senator Kim from New Jersey voted against advancing the nomination. In his questioning during the nomination hearing, Senator Kim wanted Mr. Isaacman to be more transparent about his post-confirmation agenda. However, most nominees are counseled to be as vague as possible. A few hours prior to the votes behind closed doors, the committee released the questions for the record submitted by the majority and minority parties, with Mr. Isaacman's responses. There was little news this time, given that the bigger picture situation is better understood than back in the spring. The responses reinforced the basic themes from the nomination hearings. As noted last time, one of the areas where he was clearer than others was with respect to the endgame for SLS. Now that the big beautiful bill is enacted, and Mr. Isaacman has repeatedly assured senators that he will, of course, follow the law, that would seemingly push back the earliest chance for the White House and Mr. Isaacman to terminate and retire SLS until after Artemis II. They remain concerned about long-standing cost and schedule issues for SLS. In the past year, there were rumors that the incoming and then newly returned administration wanted to terminate SLS immediately, and then in May they proposed a conflicting deadline set of Artemis III in 2027, even though there were already questions about whether all the pieces for Artemis III could be ready in 2 years. Those same questions of timing and capability gaps will come up again if they aren't already a running theme here. The HLS Acceleration Initiative that NASA started in mid to late October is attached to a delay of lunar landing capability until late 2028 or 2029. Given the history of Artemis program schedules, further schedule slips are possible, and the question about Mr. Isaacman's testimony the previous week about the capabilities that Starship and Blue Moon will demonstrate is, of course, when. Both advertised architectures can replace SLS and then possibly Orion. However, the Oversight and Appropriations Committees in Congress have taken the position that replacements be fully demonstrated with a crewed test flight. This would be similar operationally to how commercial crew was phased into International Space Station crew rotations, with Dragon eventually taking over the US-OS segment rotations from the Russian Soyuz crew transport. The big difference in this case is that the government is fully paying for SLS to continue. For now, we will have to see whether Congress is ready to move towards Mr. Isaacman's position that NASA should pivot to a new architecture after Artemis V that doesn't involve SLS. In the reports that accompany both the House and Senate appropriations bills for fiscal year 2026, there are instructions that NASA must maintain sufficient funding for spare parts and long lead hardware to support an annual launch schedule for SLS and Orion. But that language has not yet been enacted into a law that Mr. Isaacman must follow after he is confirmed. One of the many political watch items going into 2026 will be how the White House and Mr. Isaacman plan to advance their plans to eventually terminate and retire SLS. There are contracts for SLS that extend well beyond Artemis V, and the White House has been trying to cut those off since the first Trump administration. If leadership in Congress maintains their position, then the issue is if the Starship and Blue Moon architectures are not end-to-end crew-rated when the time comes to decide what flies Artemis VI. Given the lead times necessary, that decision might need to be made in the same end-of-the-decade timeframe that we're now expecting the first Artemis lunar landing. So next, we'll be watching to see what the next moves are for Congress and the White House in the new year. Thanks as always for watching. Like and subscribe if you find these videos informative and want to find out what's going on with Artemis every week. As usual, a big thanks to members of this YouTube channel who are helping to make it possible to keep doing these videos. I am posting additional content, including more videos and other posts during the week if you're interested in joining. If you're willing to make a one-time donation to support what I do, I would really appreciate it. I put a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.